And the first speaker today who will introduce to us is Joeri van der Bergh from Insights Consulting. Many of you in Europe will know him. He will present on who is up next, not what is up next, but who is up next. And for sure, you will be up next now, Joeri.
Okay. Can we have some sound? So when I talk about the next gen or generation next, I'm actually talking about Generation Z or Generation Z for the UK people, born from 1995, so actually they're kids, teens, teenagers, and young adolescents. Now, how many of you have children in this age group, primary school age or secondary school? Many of you. You probably have seen this around in 2014. You could say it was kind of a hype, the Loom Band. This is the guy who invented it, Cheong Chun, a Malaysian-born US guy from Michigan. He spent all of his family savings, about $10,000 US in 2011, to get a patent on the Loom Band, the rainbow looms. It took him 3 years to convince toy stores to actually stock the item until 2014, and in 2014 he sold more than 40 million packs of it globally. His company is now worth $130 million. Cheong Chun is not the only one making money of the loom bands, the elastic rubber bands. 2 Welsh ladies actually at a certain point last summer sold this dress made of 24,000 loom bands on eBay for 170,000 British pounds until the buyer actually pulled out of the deal, and it was actually sold for only 220 pounds in the end. You could say the loom band, was it a trend? I think it was more of a craze, because if you look at your children today in primary school, they probably are not even wearing loom bands anymore. It's already gone. It was a fad. One guy became enormously rich with his fad or craze, but that's it. Now take a look at this graph. You will see an upgoing trend for the last 5 years in leisure wear. Actually, athleisure it's called, combination of wearing athletic clothes, garments in non-athletic environments. And you also see the downward trend of wearing jeans actually among young people, except for this one peak in the fall of 2010, which was actually when the denim market adapted to the new trend and introduced the jegging, which is a combination of jeans. It looks like jeans, but it's a comfortable legging, just like athleisure wear. Now take a look back at this brand. Who knows this brand? No one? In US, it's one of the market leaders in athleisure. It's Lululemon. And together with Nike, actually, with the yoga range, they're actually a market leader in this type of very comfortable leggings. They were able to get this market share by actually making people to wear the comfortable pants, not just in the gym, but also when traveling and even at work or at school, which had many male reactions comparable to this one in the picture. Looking back at the trend, actually, in the past 2 years, the twerking trend, for which the essential item is athleisure wear, of course, was also coming up in the same period. It's not a coincidence that that's the fact. Now, to have the definition of a trend, actually, you have fads or craze, very short term, like the loom band. You have a fashion, you could say, like the jegging, and then you have a long term really change in consumer needs, consumer behavior, which is the athleisure trend. One rule to define a trend would be when US schools are prohibiting certain behavior, it's probably a trend, like the no twerking contract, for instance. Another rule, it's more difficult. When Miley Cyrus is involved, it could be either a fad or craze, it could be a fashion, or it could be a trend. Miley Cyrus is always there, you could say. This as an introduction, trend watching, it's not an easy job, because what you see as a trend watcher or researcher, is often defined by who you are. It's also called researcher's gaze in market research. So if you're into technological gadgets, you would probably have predicted or be spending presentations on the Google Glass 1 year ago, whereas today Google actually stopped producing the Google Glass because apart from some Google Glass halls, no one was really interested in the Google Glass. It was not responding to a deep consumer long-term change, actually. That's why when you're trend watching, it's often a good idea to involve multiple perspectives in the trend watching, which is why we at Insights Consulting were wondering, can we use ordinary crowds, ordinary respondents, participants, consumers into trend watching? And for this specific experiment, we wanted to detect trends among the Generation Z. So we involved not only Generation Z's, kids and teens, young adolescents, but also some other young consumers, Gen Y and less young consumers, my age, Generation X, to actually participate in an online game and share their views on the dreams, fears, ambitions, the role models, social media usage, and brands of Generation Z. This is how the online game looked like. It was a detective game where we were asking for uploading evidence, pictures, things people saw around them that would be an indication of a new trend happening among the Generation Z population. In total, we had 132 participants from 3 age groups, actually. They uploaded 338 trends. It was a lot of evidence, more than 1,000 evidence items uploaded, and almost the same amount of comments on this evidence and these trends. Now, one conclusion was actually we set 330x trends on Generation Z, but if we looked into them, it was more like meaningful observations. This is my 10-year-old Generation Z daughter, by the way. But having meaningful observations doesn't necessarily mean you're detecting a long-term trend, a long-term change in consumer behavior, actually, or something new happening with consumers. On the other hand, we found 5 characteristics by combining these meaningful observations with a number of experts that analyzed the observations and gave an interpretation on what they saw with Generation Z. And so now I want to share with you the 5 key characteristics of Generation Z. The first one is actually the pursuit of happiness. Generation Z is actually looking for happiness in everything they're doing. And as opposed to millennials or Generation Y, it doesn't necessarily mean they want to have like a successful career. They're more thinking about finding activities, finding something in life that is actually matching with their own passions, with their own interests. That's the definition of happiness for Generation Z. So they're actually involved with celebrating life all the time. Being young means actually you don't have that many responsibilities. You can still take risks and you can enjoy the daily life while being young. This actually means that serendipity, which you know you can define as something that suddenly happens unexpectedly and has a good result, a positive result, is a good way actually to attract the attention, to get the attention of Generation Z. Prankvertising, for instance, is one way of using it in advertising. Now, the most important ingredient of serendipity is actually a positive surprise. So not like this Norwegian supermarket, Europre. They actually did this Halloween campaign. They put some severed limbs inside their fridges to surprise their customers during Halloween. They actually had to apologize, and most of the customers are probably vegetarians by now. So when you surprise your customers, it's about positive surprises, of course. So always stay positive in your approach. Now, the second characteristic of Generation Z is actually they're all wanting a new and improved world. My oldest daughter, for instance, Vita, 10 years old, whenever there's news on the radio or on television, she turns off the television and the radio. because she doesn't want to hear the news anymore. It's always negative. It's about war. It's about terrorism, talking about Ebola, a lot of world problems, diseases. So she's a bit frightened when she hears the news on the radio that she will feel bad. This generation typically wants to have a better look at life, and every filter that we can offer them to improve life is actually very welcome, which is also the reason why they're using Instagram, because Instagram to them is improving their own side on life. Last summer, there was a brand of sunglasses, Tens, who introduced a pair of glasses that had an Instagram filter within the sunglasses. And their claim was actually, when you use our sunglasses, you get a 10 times better world when you look through it in summer. So filters on life. And of course, every brand can give a filter on life. I'm a big fan of this commercial of IIeX.
Mikael.
Make love, not war. With new IIeX Peace.
This was a new approach actually for IIeX. That used to be the brand that's always about young males attracting hot females. And like 1 year ago, after some brainstorms on the new generation, they decided to have a new angle to their brand positioning. And this one resonates better with Generation Z than the previous one, actually, because it's more authentic, it's more close to their own lives. Third characteristic of Generation Z is actually, of course, they're digi-natives. They have their digital tools under their skin. They're always on tablets and their mobile phone. And yes, they have binge behavior, not just binge watching television, but also binge producing television content, actually video content. My daughters are always on Snapchat, and they send like 10 to 15 Snapchats a day, just fragments of their daily life actually to all their friends at once. So it's not just binge watching top down, it's also creating stuff themselves. So Snapchat is of course an important tool to be able to connect with this generation, and many media brands understood this and have their own branded channel on Snapchat by now. For instance, Viacom, MTV has this behind the scenes footage on Snapchat for Jersey Shore, for instance, in the UK. We're living in the age of impatience. That's not only the case with Generation Z, but also with all of us here inside the room. The attention span of Generation Z is supposed to be only 8 seconds, which is the reason why Vine videos are only 8 seconds and why Snapchats disappear within 10 seconds. But what's interesting to me is that although they have a short attention span, if they're really engaged, if they're really involved with what they're doing, then actually you can still engage them in something for a longer term. For instance, Minecraft. Minecraft is a very popular game in which they actually spend hours to create their own game, their own village, not just 8 seconds, but really hours and days, because it's an engaging game to them. They're actually creating something themselves, and then the attention span gets a lot longer. Another nice example is what Lego has actually been capable of doing by introducing the Lego Friends. Lego used to be a male distorted brand because it's about construction. It wasn't about role-playing, which is more female, until they introduced Lego Friends. My 2 daughters actually built a shopping mall in 3 consecutive days. They spent 3 days building with small bricks the entire shopping mall, and then they started role-playing, which was new actually in the market of Lego, in the toy market, but by introducing themes that more resonated with the girls, they were capable of getting the longer attention span of this Generation Z. What was the most popular word in 2014, you think, in communications with each other, in messaging? What do you think was the most popular word? Any idea? Shout something. Selfie? Ah. YOLO? No? Sorry? Can't hear you. It wasn't actually a word. This was the most popular word in 2014 in messaging. It was actually an emoji. The emoji of the heart was most used in 2014 in communications. So you could say Generation Z is definitely an emotional generation. They communicate with visuals, with emojis, because it expresses better what they're feeling than just text or words. So this is a new thing that's happening today. And it's also the reason why brands like Taco Bell have actually started to have a poll to get people actually to vote for an emoji for the taco. But there is no taco emoji yet. They want people on change.org to actually vote for a taco emoji. They have 28,000 people already. They still need a few of them. So if you want a taco emoji, go ahead and vote on change.org. So this is the type of visual communication Generation Z is actually using. How many of you are using emojis in their daily communication? Oh, that's good. You have a strong Generation Z spirit inside of you. I think last week Match.com, the singles site, did a large study among 9,000 people, and they found out that people who are using emojis actually have more sex than people who are not using emojis. So good of you that you're using it today. Fourth characteristic is it's a generation why so serious. They're definitely out there to find fun, to forget about the daily stressful situations, the crisis, all the things they see on the news. So they're actually looking for lolology, which is the ideology of fun, and you could call it the neo-nonsense. The Ice Bucket Challenge was a big success also with Generation Z, because even boring nerds like Bill Gates participated in this neo-nonsense. So this actually was something interesting to them as well. And then the fifth characteristic of this generation, and it's a bit different than Generation Y, it's their search for independence. If you ask kids, teens, young adolescents, when do you want to get out of home? Their response is as soon as possible. If you would have asked millennials, they would say, oh, I'm good living at home here at Hotel Mama. For Generation Z, it's different. They're the children of the more individualistic Gen X, so they're brought up with more individual values, actually, which is quite a difference. The parents are still the role model, just like with millennials, but they want to get out of home as soon as possible. These type of superheroes are also role models to them, because they radiate a strong independence. This Game of Thrones girl, actually, it's often female strong characters that resonate with Generation Z. Jennifer Lawrence, for instance, also a superhero in the Hunger Games, but behind the scenes, she always stays true to her own identity. With all the mistakes she makes, she's perfectly imperfect to Generation Z. And this Lena Dunham, creator and director of the Girls series, is actually also very popular with Generation Z. So as a summary, I've been talking about 5 trends, you could say, or 5 characteristics at least for Generation Z: desire for a better world, pursuit of happiness, digi-natives, why so serious, and the search for independence, and also 5 things related to that in this presentation. I hope it inspired you. If you want more inspiration on the new generations, you can you can also remember me and buy the book, How Cool Brands Stay Hot. Thank you.
A brief time for questions. I prefer people from the House of Pi to ask the first question.
Yeah.
Yes?
can also send in questions with emojis if you like. Yeah.
Olga Kornilova, Ferring Pharmaceuticals. Thank you for a very inspiring presentation. I just wanted to ask you regarding your fifth sort of characteristic, searching for independence and leaving as soon as possible the houses of mom. How do you know there is another trend which is kind of happening with the boomerang kids, where they're leaving the home and then they're coming back because the world is harsher than they sort of originally thought. And my question is that I think these kids is probably seeing the world in a little bit idealistic way. And do you predict that it's going to be continuing this trend of boomerang? Because even if they want to leave the home as soon as possible, kind of this, they can realize that it's not as aspirational as they thought based on the Instagram of their friends.
Well, of course, it depends on the region where you did where you're doing the research. When they're confronted with youth unemployment, like in Southern European markets, I'm sure that Hotel Mama, especially in Italy, will still be quite popular. We do see a difference with millennials, and it's just related with the way that they've been raised by their parents. I mean, baby boomer parents, the parents of millennials, were typically helicopter parents, like arranging everything for their kids, always there as their coach, whereas Generation X parents, the parents of Generation Z, they're much more allowing them to make their own choices and actually just copying the more individualistic values they have themselves. So I do think there will be a difference between Generation Z and Generation Y. Of course, we're always children not only of our parents, but also of the times. So depending on economic times, we will see different ways of coping with the big challenges they find in life, if that's an answer to your question.
Okay, one question, yeah, the last.
The acoustics on stage are terrible, so try to
Hi there, Christoph from Point Blank International. I noticed when you were introducing the emoji generation that this is something that I've noticed to extend far beyond Generation Z. So, you know, Facebook has introduced stickers, and there's a proliferation of stickers nowadays. And so it seems to be something that is a larger trend. And some of the others strike me as larger trends as well. My question: do you actually think it's a trend that is coming from Generation Z and is being picked up by companies like Facebook and then spreads out into the wider world and other generations, or is it actually something that is created and influences Generation Z? So it's kind of a directional question.
Yeah, so the question is we're all using emojis, so it seems. Is it something that came from Generation Z, or is it something that's societal evolution? I think the shorter attention span and the evolution to a more visual style of communication, something that has been happening in the past years. If you only take a look at news items, for instance, they're getting shorter and shorter, and it's more about the visual style than it's about the content. So I think it's societal evolution. That's why we call it the age of impatience. That's bigger than just Generation Z. I think in communication style, if you would ask Generation X and baby boomers how they communicate, they would still have like offline conversations and texting rather than using emojis or FaceTime or Snapchat. So there are still differences in the tools and in the way they're actually constructing their own messages. But some of the things we see with Gen Y and Gen Z are actually, they're at the forefront of things that are happening in society for sure. Yeah.
Thank you, all of you. Great presentation.